Well, it's been years, but there's finally a new Green Lantern Corps ongoing series. The last time we had a book just titled Green Lantern Corps was the New 52 series, which ended in 2015. And then there was Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, which ended in 2018. So it's been a pretty long time since the Corps has had the room and opportunity to really spread its wings and give us a more expansive view of what the Green Lantern concept has to offer. So my hopes for this series are high. This book spins out of the Green Lantern Fractured Spectrum one-shot, so read that if you're curious, but honestly, this issue explains everything pretty well, so you'll probably be fine just starting here. Fractured Spectrum did give overlapping mission statements to both this book and the Green Lantern book starring Hal Jordan, so I do wonder how intertwined they'll be in the long run, but for now, it doesn't seem like you need to read anything else if you want to read Green Lantern Corps. Speaking of which, I've rambled on enough, so let's get into it. Green Lantern Corps number 1 is written by Morgan Hampton and Jeremy Adams, pencils by Fernando Pasarin, inks by Eau Claire Albert, colors by Arif Prianto, and letters by Dave Sharp. The title of this issue is New World Rising. The last few years of Green Lantern comics have seen a lot of power structures across the universe rise and fall. The United Planets started out as a democratic alliance of worlds before becoming a galactic empire, whose corruption has seeped into the Green Lantern Corps, slowly replacing its members with bad cops who'd follow any horrific order they're given. Along the way, every other Lantern Corps had their central battery blown up, all before the evil at the heart of the United Planets was ultimately defeated. Nobody knows what the future of the United Planets as an organization is going to be, but to say that it's a disastrous mess would be being nice. Thanks to some long-term planning by the Guardians, there's still a green central battery, which means the Green Lantern Corps can start to slowly rebuild everything that's been torn down in recent years. Although it's going to be an uphill battle. There aren't very many Green Lanterns yet, and that's because recruitment is no longer automated. Mogo, who used to direct the rings as they sought out new recruits, has been out of commission ever since the events of the Civil Corps storyline. The Guardians have decided to take a very hands-off advisory role in this new iteration of the Corps, meaning that the only way to get more Green Lanterns is for the existing Green Lanterns to personally choose each new recruit and then go hand out every individual ring in person. It's the kind of process that can lead to much more thoughtful selections, but the trade-off is that recruitment will take much longer than ever before. Although that might be for the best, since there's still so much to do before everything on Oa is up and running again. There's a panel that describes Oa as Precinct Prime, which seems to suggest that they have other precincts somewhere. Maybe this is referring to the sector houses, or some other secondary base of operations. I've talked before about how useful it would be for the Green Lantern Corps to decentralize their operation, so maybe this is a sign that we'll actually see that start to happen. But for now, their main headquarters is being supported by the technical expertise of Kelly Quintella the Teen Lantern, and Ellie Rose Stewart, the sentient construct of John Stewart's dead sister. Between the two of them, Oa's systems are slowly coming back online, so the Corps can finally start going back to work, which means a lot of stress is piling up on Jessica Cruz. Apparently, since the last time we saw her, Jessica was voted to be the captain of the Green Lantern Corps, and my feelings about that are complicated. Jessica is my favorite character, so it's cool to see her elevated to this position, and it makes sense that the other Green Lanterns would choose to follow someone who's this good at understanding and dealing with fear. But what I can't stop thinking about is the fact that the last job Jessica had, other than being a superhero, was working in the kitchen of a cafe, hoping to one day work her way up to being a waitress. And all of that's great, those are good jobs, but they are so far from being the leader of an intergalactic law enforcement organization that I can't imagine this working out as the Corps continues to scale up. And that's probably the point, right? Give a character a job they're not the ideal candidate for so it can be a source of drama and personal growth. It just feels like a pretty massive leap to put Jessica in charge of this whole thing, but who knows? Maybe it'll lead to some entertaining chaos. And speaking of chaos, the Corps already has their hands full. Teams of Green Lanterns have been dispatched across the universe to prevent Nathan Broom from finding the components he needs to build a central battery filled with the power of sorrow. Also, I guess we're just supposed to call Nathan the Sorrow and not the Sorrow Lantern. I'm not sure why. I mean, his origin was unconventional, but it feels like splitting hairs. Anyway, sorrow isn't supposed to be part of the emotional spectrum, so if Nathan activates a central battery filled with sorrow, it could drive a massive wedge into the emotional spectrum and shatter the whole thing, doing catastrophic damage to the universe. And because of all the crazy stuff that's been happening to the spectrum lately, random people all over the universe have begun manifesting emotional spectrum powers just by feeling something intensely enough. The most notable example so far has been Sinestro, who reacted to the attacks on his homeworld by manifesting intense rage on par with the most powerful Red Lanterns. But because he's Sinestro, his willpower was strong enough to get all that rage under control. And since they need to keep an eye on him, and they need experienced Green Lanterns now more than ever, Sinestro has been allowed to rejoin the Green Lantern Corps. And not a moment too soon, because there's been a massive spike of fear energy on the planet Tamaran. This is the homeworld of Starfire from the Titans, and her sister Blackfire is currently the queen. Blackfire is trying her best to protect the city from a gigantic construct of Zahal, the god worshipped by the Tamaranian people. The source of the construct is a Tamaranian woman named Vizaru, a religious zealot whose crisis of faith is manifesting as a construct of her god coming to smite her for not believing enough. Sinestro talks to her about the nature of fear, how it isn't a weakness, but rather a tool to make your willpower stronger. Illustrated nicely by him slowly pushing his way through the yellow energy bubble she's been hiding inside of. And thanks to Sinestro, Vizaru is able to get a handle on her fear to the point that the construct disappears. And what I really like about this is the fact that for Sinestro, this whole encounter really was about teaching someone else what he'd already figured out about the nature of fear as it relates to willpower. He wasn't just trying to stop the conflict, he was trying to impart his ideology in a way that would directly benefit someone else. He helps her understand how to overcome her own fears. He stands up for her when Blackfire comes looking to lay blame, and then even recommends her for induction into the Green Lantern Corps. Because even though her fear was great enough to topple a city, the threat ended because her willpower was even stronger. And that right there is the solution to both of the Green Lantern Corps' biggest problems. They need new recruits that have to be hand-selected. And they need to deal with the threat posed by anyone spontaneously manifesting emotional spectrum powers. Well, it stands to reason that anyone who has enough willpower to overcome their wild emotional spectrum powers would be a perfect candidate for the Green Lantern Corps. These emotional flare-ups become a trial by fire to see if someone has the willpower to make it as a Green Lantern. I love this idea, and it was right in front of us this whole time. It's worth mentioning how different the recruitment process is now, beyond what we've already talked about. Not too long ago, a ring would have just bluntly informed her that she's a Green Lantern now. It would fly up to her and say, "Vizaru of Tamaran, you have the ability to overcome great fear, welcome to the Green Lantern Corps." And then it would put itself on her finger and that would be it. But what John says as he walks up to her, with a ring hovering above his open, outstretched hand, is, "Vizaru of Tamaran, you have the extraordinary ability to overcome great fear. The Green Lantern Corps would be honored to have you among our ranks." I cannot overstate how much more respectful and appreciative this approach is. They're not just taking for granted the idea that she'd join them. They seem keenly aware that they need her just as much as she needs them. In fact, they probably need her more than she needs them at this point. And maybe that's where the change comes from, because the old form of recruitment implied a strong sense of pride. That of course anyone would be honored to have membership thrust upon them. Now, instead of all that, they've chosen to go with a much more humble approach that highlights how much they value each individual recruit. This isn't some cosmic algorithm making a selection. It's a real person making an offer, one that she's free to refuse. Still, with all that said, I think it's important to be a little suspicious going forward. Sinestro just convinced John to recruit a new Green Lantern who already sees Sinestro in a very positive light and feels a strong sense of gratitude towards him. She's proven to have a high affinity for the yellow light of fear, and calling her a zealot implies that she has an unwavering sense of loyalty. I do not believe that Vizaru has any nefarious intentions at all, but I wouldn't put it past Sinestro to manipulate her, and others like her, towards his old goal of making the Green Lantern Corps do things his way. Once the Lanterns all return to Oa, John is immediately given his next mission. The Thanagarians want help salvaging what's left of their homeworld, and they ask for John by name. And he is dreading it, because he knows who's about to walk through the door. They haven't said her name yet, but this is likely Shaira Hall, Hawkwoman. It's important to note that Shaira is a completely different person from Kendra Saunders, the Hawk Girl who's on the Justice Society. Even though I think both Kendra and Shaira are reincarnations of the same person, reincarnating across space and time, and these two lives just happen to overlap, I think. But regardless, this is yet another example of notable cartoon stuff making its way into the comics. Just like how the other Green Lantern book has Hal interacting with Razor and flying around in the Interceptor, John's relationship with Shaira was a defining aspect of the Justice League cartoon, and it's never been reflected in the mainline comics before. Now it looks like that might change. And hey, maybe it'll come in the form of a love triangle, because Blackfire was impressed with the way John took charge of the situation on Tamaran, and she wants to make him her royal concubine, so I could see them setting up a big cool fight between Blackfire and Hawkwoman. A few more things before we finish up here. Another Green Lantern went to Tamaran with John and Sinestro. This is Benai Brune. She's been around since the 80s and has shown up a handful of times. I'm glad to see her as part of the team, but I wish she had more to do or say. She only speaks twice in this issue and isn't even visible on panel the second time. So, cool Easter egg, but I want more from the alien Green Lanterns than this, especially the obscure ones. There's a scene of John and Joe walking through headquarters having a serious conversation about how busy they are and how Joe is worried about John's state of mind. And in the background, you see Guy and this other Green Lantern processing this skinny blue alien who's been arrested. Suddenly the blue guy puffs up like a balloon, then he explodes into a torrent of what I hope is water, and what's left behind is a little baby blue guy. And now Guy's feeding it a bottle. Did that alien give birth? Did it turn itself into a baby? Is this normal? We are never going to know, and that makes me love it even more. Fantastic visual comedy, keeping things light during a serious conversation. Love it. More, please. Although I have to say, this is the most like a police station that Oa has ever looked. I liked it for this scene, mostly because it facilitates the funny stuff going on in the background, but in general, I prefer Oa to look less mundane. Lastly, I want to talk briefly about the way this issue began. John and a bunch of other Green Lanterns bust up a trafficking ring run by Kanjar Row. They want this to be a big show of force, the kind of spectacle that will help reestablish both their presence and their reputation. And that's good, they should probably do a lot more of that. The thing that I wanted to talk about is the fact that Saint Walker is here, and he's a Green Lantern. This issue is co-written by Jeremy Adams, who also writes the Green Lantern book starring Hal Jordan. Saint Walker suddenly appearing as a Green Lantern with no comment or explanation is an example of a big problem that I've had with the way Jeremy Adams writes Green Lantern stories. If you've watched my videos covering his run, you've probably heard me talk about this already, but it bears repeating. One of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to storytelling, in any medium, is when things that should be a big deal are casually thrown into a story only to be ignored or treated as insignificant. Their presence didn't change anything, and the story would have been the exact same without them. In fact, it would have been better without them, because then we wouldn't be left wondering why all of these interesting ideas didn't get explored at all. This happens constantly in Jeremy Adams' Green Lantern writing, where we're reading along and then, oh by the way, Razor is here. And there's some super vague allusion to him having history with Hal and Kilowog. What's that all about? Who knows? Oh, by the way, St. Walker is here, and he clearly still has his Blue Lantern powers, even though the blue central battery is gone. Does it make sense that he'd be locked up in a jail with his working Blue Lantern ring, surrounded by Green Lanterns that make his blue ring even more powerful? Forget about that, I guess, because oh, by the way, St. Walker is a Green Lantern now. What? Why? Oh, by the way, Razor is a Green Lantern now too. Oh, by the way, the Guardians are back somehow, and they're different somehow, but nobody will ever talk about how or why or what any of that means. I could go on listing stuff, but you get the point. I don't want to feel like I'm reading the Cliff Notes version of the story. I want to see every interesting new idea that's introduced be thoroughly explored, because otherwise what's the point of even introducing them? All it does is make me imagine a better story in my head than the one that's on the page. I feel like I should add a disclaimer that I don't hate Jeremy Adams' writing. In fact, I think his run on The Flash was so good that in another 10 years, people will look back on it just as fondly as they do the Mark Waid run and the Jeff Johns run. I can't say that about his Green Lantern run, at least not yet, but I know he can do incredible work. Now, all that said, I think this issue of Green Lantern Corps is much better than main DC Universe Green Lantern has been in a long time. And I have to think that's because of the co-writer, Morgan Hampton. I'm not sure how long Jeremy Adams will be co-writing Green Lantern Corps, but I'm eager to see what Morgan Hampton can do when he's got all of these characters to himself. I expect great things, and this issue was an excellent start. So that was Green Lantern Corps number 1. Now I want to know what you think. Do you trust Sinestro? Do you like the idea of bringing some form of the John Shiera relationship from the cartoon into the main DC universe? What's your opinion on this new approach to recruiting new Green Lanterns? Tell me all about it in the comment section down below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already, because there's plenty more Green Lantern videos on the way. Until then, thank you for taking the time to watch. My name is Dan, we'll talk again soon.